Take your seat, settle in, and listen up. Gophers 101 is underway and in session. It's time to go to class and talk all things Gophers.
I think the only thing missing from Row the Boat, Ski-U-Mah, Go Gophers is the Howard Dean, yeah, at the very end of that. Remember that, Thor? One of the first big, I guess we would classify that as kind of a viral clip, right, back in the day?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, we could get something in there that you know, the music always makes me want to run through a wall, so could definitely get another sounder in there.
You wanting to run through a wall about football? Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's been a good week so far, and hopefully the Gophers extend that on Saturday, because that's going to be the last thing of our week, you know, with the late kick on Saturday. But yeah, it's been a good football week so far.
Literally, we will end Saturday with Gopher football, and we will begin Sunday with Gopher football. We'll get to Cal here in just a little bit. I know the quality of the opponent, but we wouldn't be doing our due diligence if we didn't at least spend a few moments on the Gophers' dismantling of Northwestern State. Thor, Gophers do what they should do. They dominate a bad opponent. We talked about it last week. We expected that the scenario that played out hopefully would happen, and it did. Not many times, Thor, doesn't matter the opponent, not many times will you watch a game where three different quarterbacks complete a pass and two different place kickers attempt extra points. That's how out of hand the game got, with it being 59-0 at half. The only real downside here, Thor, is something that I do believe is entirely outside of the control of the team. Sometimes the football gods, if I can use that term, just decide you're going to get injured. I don't think the Gophers, I agree, playing Darius Taylor, my hope was he would get 10, 15 carries and be done. I think you had to play him. You don't, want him getting rusty. Even though you assume your opponent is not great, Thor, you can't assume you're going to win the game until you play it. So I have no problem that Darius Taylor played against Northwestern State, but just our luck that Darius Taylor would get injured. And at this point, who knows if he plays or not on Saturday. My hunch is that he won't, and the next time you see Darius Taylor will be the Big Ten opener against Rutgers. I don't know that. That's just a hunch. I hope he plays. But yeah, I mean, your reaction to the dismantling of Northwestern State, and you told me there was not a single, I just made up a word, single draftable player, Thor, that was on anybody's radar. And oh boy, did it look like it this past Saturday at Huntington Bank Stadium.
Yeah, they look like a JV team, and that makes sense. I mean, Northwestern's a bottom-of-the-barrel FCS program, so this was your glorified bye. Getting into the stats, is 66-0. You mentioned 59-0 at halftime. I made the joke on Twitter at halftime that's the point in NCAA 14 when you put the pedal to the metal and go for 100. Obviously, in real life, it's a little bit different. So we had the waves of backups coming in, the waves of true freshmen. That's cool. You know, I mean, that the freshmen get to play in a game. You get to close this thing out. 35 points by Minnesota in the first quarter, the most by any Gopher team in any quarter since 1973. So all that was good to see as well. Northwestern State, 42 yards of total offense, 4-2. They turned the ball over 4 times. So, I mean, this on both sides could not have been any more dominant, which brings us to the injuries. Super unfortunate that Darius Taylor is lost in a game where you did not need him. I agree with you. You play your starters, for a little bit, at least in a game like this against an opponent like this, before you start getting the backups in, you start getting the true freshmen in. There was no mistake made as far as that goes. You know, it's the sport of football. If there is something to quibble with, and if there was a mistake made, we talked about this on the last episode. It occurred on the evening of Thursday, August 28th, when it was either 14 or 16 carries were given to Darius Taylor in the fourth quarter of a game against a MAC team. For 30 total carries, I believe, for Darius Taylor that day. And we talked about it at the time. We know why it occurred. The Gophers botched some scoring opportunities in that opener against Buffalo, and because of that, heading into the fourth quarter, that game was a little bit closer than you would have liked. And they obviously used Taylor to ice that game. I wish some of those touches had gone to another running back. Darius Taylor, as Gopher fans know, fabulous talent and a two-way talent, both as the bell cow runner and then also a guy who is dangerous as a receiver, a guy that you need him on the field to be viable offensively against better opponents. But that's a guy that has picked up nagging injuries throughout his career. So it's something that he is already susceptible to, which for the opener against a team like Buffalo, for me, it would have been a little bit more important. Try to figure out a way, even with the game script going a little bit different than maybe you thought heading into that fourth quarter, try to cut down those touches a little bit. But yeah, as far as the Northwestern State thing, like, again, you have to have your starters go out there, whatever. We'll see if we get, the Gophers desperately need Darius Taylor on Saturday night. The comments from PJ Fleck to this point have been a bit vague. That's the college team's prerogative. We're not beholden, to the same kind of rules that you see in professional football with the reporting, some of that stuff. Hopefully we get more information, later this week. But for Drake Lindsey here, you're going your first road start and you're going back to time zones to play at night, late at night in Berkeley, California. If you don't have Darius Taylor there and this Cal team that we have seen with an improved offense, you're not going to be able to just keep the ball on the ground in that game. And you're going to have to do some stuff. They need Darius Taylor there. So, keep your eyes peeled on that situation this week.
Yeah, PJ did say post-game, and I believe he said it since then, that the injury was maybe not as bad as it could have been. But as you just alluded to, Thor, one, who really knows what that means? And B, because they're college, technically still students, it's a little bit different as far as what we get for injury report. My hunch, we'll find out about 90 minutes before kickoff on Saturday night if Darius Taylor's playing. For what it's worth, I lean that he won't. However, I hope that he does. One player defensively I want to call out that I've been really impressed with the first 2 weeks of the season. I think it's a player you're also mildly familiar with. Cornerback Jon Nestor. He had that basically walk-in pick six to start the game. He was pretty darn good in coverage week one against Buffalo. We talked about going into the season that not specifically at safety with Coy Parrish and Kerry Brown, but maybe at cornerback, maybe not even that they wouldn't be any good, just that it was a bit questionable to start the season. Well, again, I know, consider the quality of the opponent, but we've talked about Buffalo being a scrappy team. They won 9 games last year. Northwestern State, say what you want, but to be able to read and react, know that a play's coming, and literally before most people have sat down, I'm not even sure the national anthem singer was off the field, to have that pick six to start the game. He'll be tested more against Cal and upcoming in the Big Ten. But a really good start for him, and I believe really good signs for the Gophers defense if he is indeed turning into, I don't want to call him a lockdown corner, but just a playable starting cornerback in the Big Ten.
Yeah, that's it. And that was really cool to see. Getting that thing started off the right way. Jon Nestor been great through the first 2 games of the season. Now on Saturday night, we're going to find out how good Jon Nestor is, or where he is at this point in his development. That true freshman quarterback from Cal, and Ross, I hope you practice the pronunciation because I'm still not there with it. But that true freshman that Cal has, a lefty, he will remind Gopher fans watching that game on Saturday night. He's going to remind you of a young Michael Penix. I'm just going to warn you right now. It's a big, strapping left-hander that is a pure pocket passer, and he's got a laser for an arm. That kid throws frozen ropes all over the field. I couldn't believe it the first game. I had some buddies over, and we were watching. It was Clemson LSU, and on the side TV, I think it was Texas A&M UTSA. That game had ended, and so then on my side TV, it switched it over to the Cal Oregon State game, and it was so late. I didn't think nothing of it. But then all of a sudden, this Cal quarterback someone said, "Who the f is that Cal quarterback?" Because this kid, this no name, this true freshman was just lighting it up. And some of the throws you saw were absolutely insane. But that brings to the forefront the Gophers secondary on Saturday night. The Gophers secondary is going to have to play well for the Gophers to win that game. This is a game where the Las Vegas sportsbooks came out, open the Gophers as 2.5-point favorites, but you're right around there, under the 3 points. You're obviously right around a pick'em situation there. Gophers are going to need their best game. Mention how important it will be Darius Taylor's status for the offense, on defense, the secondary, and then the pass rush, of course. But those two things come to the forefront in this matchup.
So, Thor, I watched highlights of the first 2 weeks. I cannot say that I'm a Cal expert. I've watched Cal highlights the first 2 weeks. Last week, the ACC network highlights specifically stole a page out of Ross and Manny's playbook from Sunday. Manny joins me to recap games, typically the day following a Gopher football game. We just settled on calling him JKS.
Like that.
Which I believe might just be the best practice here. If I had to guess, I'd go with Jaren Kewe Sagapalute.
Oh.
And I don't
sounds better than what I could have
close.
Put together.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think that's anywhere close. I can tell you, Thor, Cal will come in at 2-0, 34-15 winners over Oregon State in week 1. Oregon State might be bad. 35-3 winners over FCS Texas Southern in week 2. They are led by a true freshman, not a redshirt freshman. That true freshman QB, we'll call him JKS. First true freshman to start at Cal, Thor, since
Jared Goff?
That is correct.
Yeah.
The lefty QB has 493 yards passing in parts of 2 games, 3 TDs, 1 interception. He is a threat enough as well to be able to get out of the pocket, run a bit. They may even call some run plays for him. You kind of alluded to the secondary needing to hold up, but Thor, I would also say equal to the Gophers' chances at success on Saturday night in Berkeley would be getting pressure, and not just getting pressure, but getting home on the quarterback. I actually view this Gophers game this weekend as more about, and I can't believe I'm saying this, what can the defense do against Cal to limit Cal, than I do about the offense getting their job done. If the Gophers defense, and this could be famous last words, if the Gophers defense holds Cal to 24 or less, maybe even 23 or less, I'm reasonably confident the Gophers will find a way to win this game. I do expect it to be close. I would be shocked if either team runs the other off the field. And I wouldn't be shocked if one team scored 30 and maybe won slightly comfortably at the end of the game. But I guess I'd be shocked if it's a blowout. And where we sit right now, with what limited information we know about these teams through 2 weeks, it just feels like a one-score game. Call it 3, call it 7. I don't know. Call it whatever you want. It just, to me, feels like a 27-20 football game one way or another. I hope I'm wrong, and when you and I talk next week, Thor, we're talking about a 31-13 Gophers victory. That would be awesome. Just from where I'm sitting right now on this Thursday morning edition of Gophers 101, that's not how I see it, but I'm willing to have you talk me in any which direction.
I think the fair way to say it is the Gophers can win the multiple different variants of this game, or there's multiple different avenues for the Gophers to win this game. If this game turns into a low-scoring defensive struggle, I mean, that's the Gopher scenario in general, but obviously you would like the Gophers more in that kind of a scenario. But if points start getting put on the board and it becomes a firefight, I think the Gophers could also be viable in that. It's certainly not their preference, but they could win that way. Whereas with Cal, I think you got one path. You need to put points on the board. If the game becomes that sort of low scoring thing and the Gophers are doing a good job against Cal's passing attack, it's just they're not putting the points on the board on offense there, and that's why the thing close. The Gophers are going to win that game script. It just is what it is. Cal needs to put points on the board. So there is all the pressure on Cal's true freshman quarterback, but if he steps up to the challenge, and the Gophers secondary, which to this point has not really been tested, right? Like in the first game against Buffalo's starting quarterback is a fifth-year or 6th year, Taquan Roberson, scrambler only. We call him a dual threat, but really, Taquan Roberson's a one threat. All he does is scramble. He can't throw. And the only time that he threatened the Gophers secondary, it was when they called that nice play around midfield where they caught the Gopher safety in one-on-one coverage with Victor Snow, the athletic slot best receiver on Buffalo, and got deep, and that was the one touchdown that Buffalo accounted for. But secondary for the Gophers, you're going to be tested in a way in this game that you have not to that point. And if the Gopher secondary plays well, the Gophers are winning this game. It just is what it is. They don't need to be elite for the Gophers to win this game. Again, the game scripts can go a couple different ways. Gophers can still be successful, but that is your guaranteed path if you can do that. So it's going to be really interesting to see the true freshman here against that Gopher secondary. It's going to be interesting to see the looks that the Gophers defensive coaching staff goes with here against the young kid. You would have to assume they're going to try to confuse the heck out of that kid. How quickly the Gophers defensive ranks, are they ready now to give you sort of an NFL-esque type pre-snap against post-snap look? Are we comfortable enough with the Gophers, the veterans there, to be able to roll the looks like that and change the picture for the kid after the snap? That's going to be some interesting schematic things to keep an eye on there, and how much confidence do the Gophers have in their back end defensive players with some of that stuff. But yeah, that's the fascinating matchup in this game to watch.
Well, really a good test for first-year defensive coordinator Danny Collins, who will see what is closest to a Big Ten opponent than anything he's seen thus far when it comes to the quality and caliber of players on Cal versus Buffalo and Northwestern State. So I've said all along, going back to preseason, I think this would be a tough task for the Gophers to go to Cal and win, and I could be overvaluing Cal. I just think younger, more inexperienced quarterback, first-year defensive coordinator, still trying to figure out the offensive line. Although I've been encouraged in the first 2 games, I'd still like to see them be able to run the ball better and more efficient and more forceful. But maybe that will come as the season goes on. Win or lose, I'm not going to hang the team out to dry. I will say this, though, Thor, and I want to get your opinion. If the Gophers win, and I said going into the year, accounting for Cal as a loss, I thought this was a 6 or 7 win team. More than likely 6. I think I settled on 7 because I thought they could get there, maybe steal a game. Maybe that's Nebraska. Maybe that's Iowa. I don't know. And yes, I do think at this point, for people outside of Minnesota, beating Nebraska would be considered stealing a game this year. However, if the Gophers beat Cal, Thor, and they get to 3-0, they get their bye week before hosting Rutgers to start the Big Ten season, I will say, at least for me, not speaking for everybody else, but at least for me, I'm starting to lean towards I believe in this Gophers team being 7, 8, 9 wins good, if they can beat Cal. If they don't beat Cal, I think the number that I talked about, and I think you talked about at the beginning of the year, right around 6 wins is probably in play, but it also depends on what it looks like. Real roundabout way of saying, if the Gophers beat Cal, I'll really start believing in some of the people that said at the beginning of the year, smarter people than me, this team can win 8, 9 games. But if they don't beat Cal, I think 8, 9 games is out. I'll really start believing if you can beat Cal, get your week off, and follow it up by getting to 4-0 by winning your first Big Ten game of the year. I'll really start believing at that point. Fair assessment?
Yeah, I think, yeah. I mean, it's a big game because it's the first, coin flip one, right? And this one is a true coin flip,
And there's a lot this year. We talked about that. Most of these games are coin flips.
For sure. And when we broke down the schedule, Ross, it was the way that we looked at it, both of us, it was you have your 2 freebie games. Those are the 2 that we just came from. So your freebie games are done, is the bad news. But the good news is that you're 2-0. And then you had the 2 games on the schedule that I don't think even the biggest Gopher homer Bobo thinks the Gophers can win. The 2 road games at Ohio State and Oregon. But outside of that, you had 8 games. And I think the term that you used, Ross, was within the margin of error for those games. And this one is might be the closest of those. I mean, like, I think this game, when we get to kickoff, I think this thing is going to be like exactly pick 'em. I think the line is a little bit too high. Just getting into that right off the get. I think this line should be a pick'em, and by the time we get to kickoff, I expect it to be a pick'em. And we'll see what ends up happening with Darius Taylor's status and if that was announced in advance. But I think this line should be a pick'em. And just getting into the game itself, I mean, we talked about the Gopher secondary against the young kid with Cal. That's going to be something interesting to watch. And then the thing with Darius Taylor, the Cal defense, they lost a lot of dudes over the offseason, and we had some pessimism about Cal's defense. Now, Cal hasn't played anyone yet. Right? Oregon State is okay, but Oregon State's not even close to what they were even 2 years ago. Since when they got kicked out of the Pac-12, or when the other Pac-12 members left them in Wazoo, Oregon State has lost a lot of talent. Then they lost their coaching staff, et cetera. Not the same team, so not as impressive of a win. But Cal's defense in the early going against them, and then against the FCS opponent, the counting stats, you don't know how much of it to take seriously because of the caliber of opponent. But one thing I can say is Cal in the early going is not tackled well. And when you're looking at a mediocre opponent and then a bad opponent, and you're not tackling them well, that's where if you're thinking about the Gophers, you're thinking about Darius Taylor, you start licking your chops a little bit. Couple of the offensive playmakers, we see the pass catchers for the Gophers as well. Guys that are slippery, guys that have explosion, could create some issues. If you have one-on-one situation, you get the ball in your hands against a defense that struggles to tackle. The overall profile of the Cal's defense, we're not going to know that till they play a couple of different legitimate opponents, and this is the first one. Again, like we're talking about, but that's another thing to keep an eye on, is Cal struggling early to make tackles against worse offenses, and now this Gopher offense comes in. Darius Taylor, his status for this game, it's absolutely crucial.
I went down this road on Sunday with Manny, and I'll do it quickly with you, and then I'll be done with schedule talk for the year. A lot of these games, when it comes to non-conference, are scheduled years in advance. This Cal game was announced years ago. The Gophers announced a handful of years back they have a home-and-home with Alabama. There was one with Texas A&M on the books. I think it still is on the books. So sometimes you don't always know when you schedule these games a handful of years ago what teams are going to look like. Full disclosure, I do not know off the top of my head when this game was scheduled with Northwestern State. I knew about it as far ago as about a year back. Could have been much further. One of the things you always see, Thor, and it's just not an argument I'm super passionate about, is whenever a team, and this is not unique to Minnesota, takes on an FCS team, and I encourage everybody, go look at the FBS schedule last week. Plenty of teams played, we'll call them also-ran opponents, and they didn't all play also-ran opponents who are regional. It was probably about 50-50. The two pushbacks you get is you shouldn't be playing teams like this. Well, that's not possible. There's not enough FBS teams for everybody to play unless they made a rule that said you're only playing these teams, and nobody's ever pushed that. Nobody's going to push for that. They want games like the Gophers just had for glorified practices and exhibitions like Thor talked about. The second part to that argument is you should do it regional. My comeback to that has been, yeah, they've even lost a couple times, but the Gophers have played North Dakota State, South Dakota State. Don't believe in recent memory if they've played Northern Iowa or anybody else. Or I know they haven't played North Dakota either in quite some time, as far as I remember. Thor, for the last time, I'll say this. I don't care if you play a team, or even I told Manny, how come nobody ever says, why don't they play Drake? Drake plays FCS football and plays St. Thomas. Would it be cool if Minnesota, if the Gophers played St. Thomas, Drake, Northern Iowa, South Dakota State, North Dakota State? Sure. But I don't care. The reality is, even though some of those teams that I named are pretty dang good, the reality is the Gophers are going to win those games 9 out of 10 times. And if you're going to win those games 9 out of 10 times, I think you'd rather do it against a team like Western Illinois, Northwestern State, Maine, New Hampshire. It doesn't bug me that they don't play regional teams. If they did, great. It's kind of cool. I'm not going to lose a second of sleep over whether they play Northern Iowa or they don't.
Yeah, to me, this is
for football. For football, by the way, I think for basketball, there's a lot more work you can do because 360 teams play Division I basketball. It's different for football, in my opinion. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, for me, this is a two-pronged thing. It's from the perspective of the NCAA or the governing body, and then it's from the perspective of the individual program. As far as from the perspective of the individual program, I actually like if I was the Gophers, I wouldn't be playing this game on Saturday at Cal. To be honest, I absolutely would schedule the worst FCS team I could every year, and my other two out of conference games would be the worst FBS teams that I could get to travel to Minnesota within my budget. Kirk Signetti talked about this, and people gave him some crap, but talking about we play a 9-game Big Ten schedule. Like those 3 games out of conference, we're looking to get wins. So that's just what it is. You are scheduling victories. You are scheduling your way halfway to a bowl game. If you give yourself 3, quote unquote cupcakes in the non-conference, that matters. It matters to these programs to make bowl games, and it is legal to do so. So as long as it's legal, the smartest thing to do, and this happened in my undergrad. Yeah, Ross, I went to Kansas. Folks out there, I went to undergrad at University of Kansas. When I arrived in Lawrence, Kansas they were one of the biggest moribund FBS programs in existence. It had been since Glenn Mason when they had a couple winning seasons. Glenn Mason, former Kansas coach before he was former Minnesota coach. And then, but prior to that, it had been, 56 years. Anyhow, they had hired a coach named Mark Mangino, the Mangenius, I call him. And anyway, first thing he did was switch their non-conference. Like, we're not playing these good opponents out of conference anymore. It's in those days, 4 in the Big 12. You play 4 out of conference, and it was 4 cupcakes every year. Mangino ended up turning that thing around. My last year in undergrad, Kansas won the Orange Bowl, which was just this incredible turnaround. But part of the philosophy was we get our easy wins in the non-conference. So I don't blame Fleck at all. In fact, I give him credit for accepting what I believe is a ludicrously difficult and sneakily so non-conference game on Saturday night. Again, I wouldn't have agreed to do it, even in a home-and-home situation. Me as the administrator, I'm paying out the money to get 3 cupcakes to come to me every year as the P4 team that Minnesota is. From the perspective of the NCAA, I have a totally different viewpoint. If I was named the commissioner or the president of the NCAA tomorrow, one of the very first things I would do is I would change the rule that allows teams, FBS teams, to use 1 victory over an FCS team towards bowl eligibility every year. That rule would be gone within my first 10 minutes in office. Sure, schedule 3 FCS opponents if you want. If you're an FBS team, 0 of them will count towards your bowl eligibility. That would be the end of FBS teams scheduling FCS teams right then with the stroke of my pen. And hey, schedule, if you want to schedule 3 bottom barrel P4 teams, great. Or I'm sorry, G5 teams, great. You can still do your cupcakes, but the thing of the where we have essentially NFL teams playing semi-pro teams is basically FBS against FCS football. When you're at the top of the end, and then especially bottom level FCS teams like we saw with the Gophers, Northwestern State. Nobody wants to see that. Nobody does. The only ones are the parents of the kids, the true freshmen, and the backups that got in, and that's great. There's a place for that, but for me, I would try to outlaw that out of the sport. But until it is outlawed, if you're a coach, if you're an administrator at one of these programs, your only thing is to do right by the program, and to do right by the program at most of these, a Minnesota-sized school. For me, it would be 3 cupcakes every year.
Yeah, I'm with you. Schedule your Sun Belt, schedule your MAC, schedule your Mountain West teams. Yeah, you might find some really good teams in there, but generally, even projecting out 2-3 years, okay, Utah State's pretty good, but if they come here, we should probably win that game. Colorado State, Texas State, Louisiana Monroe, any team in the MAC for the most part. Yeah. Those are fairly safe teams that are going to push you a bit, you can learn from. But 95% of the time, especially if it's at home, you should walk away victorious. I think I agree pretty much spot on with everything that you said. I know when Jerry Kill got here, the conversation was the other way. We need to be playing tougher non-conference teams. So the landscape of college football has changed entirely in a decade, and I'm with you. I would be scheduling 3 FBS teams that I'm reasonably confident you would win, to stack those wins, but again, have harder glorified practices. Thor, I would play 3 MAC teams every year and just call it the Minnesota Maction games. That's I mean, that's another way you could handle it.
100%. And Ross, lastly, the other thing about the local, playing teams that are closer, I would absolutely not do that if I was the Gophers. And the best example of this was getting upset by North Dakota State. But you mentioned St. Thomas, and people in town, wouldn't that be great? You're going to play an FCS team anyway. Why not do St. Thomas and then to be a big deal locally, all this difference? What is in that for the Gophers? You're going to legitimize little brother in town and then give them a shot to stun you? If you beat St. Thomas by 50 points, you don't win anything. It's the same thing as beating the brains out of Northwestern State. But if St. Thomas does to you what North Dakota State did, and they come and they ambush you, you have more. Even playing them legitimizes them. Which, keep in mind, you're in quasi competition. I mean, I realize they're not going for the same kind of recruits, but if St. Thomas builds up, they got money there. If they then wanted to play FBS football, now it's a direct competitor. If I'm the Gophers, I'm not legitimizing St. Thomas. St. Thomas, you have to legitimize yourself. When you can get up to the level where then it makes sense for us to schedule you, that's when I would talk about it. I would never schedule North Dakota State. No, you go and beat up on those other FCS teams. We don't want you here. The South Dakota State. We don't want any part of you. I would keep going the bottom barrel of the FCS. But yeah, St. Thomas, I'm not playing them because that legitimizes a team locally. You help pull them up. You never know what would happen down the road. So I would stay away from that.
Shameless plug, as I am the chief utility man here at SKOR North. If you want Tommy football takes and Tommy sports takes, audio only on Apple and Spotify. Ross Brendel, Corbu State, is talking St. Thomas Athletics
Heck yeah.
weekly for Tommy Sports Weekly. I think you're right. By the way, on St. Thomas, I know this is not the St. Thomas pod, I've said for a handful of years now, it's only a matter of time before that basketball team wins the Summit League Conference tournament.
Amen.
And they're in the NCAA tournament. You're already starting to compete on the fringe with Gopher basketball.
Yep.
That football team, Thor, I think it's still going to take a bit, but you let them get a new stadium built or renovate their stadium, it's only a matter of time before St. Thomas is playing in the MAC or the Conference USA. I truly do believe that. I just don't know if that's 7 years or 17 years away, but that day is coming because you mentioned a key fact. The money that is at that university, I think at some point will get that done. Just something to monitor if you're a fan of Gophers athletics. Okay, we've had two Thorfers. We've had revisiting Thorfers or Gophers in the pros. Max Brosmer was our first one when we knew he made the Minnesota Vikings last week. Why am I blanking? Oh, Cody Lindenberg with the Oakland, California, Las Vegas Raiders. We've now had a game, Thor. Who are we highlighting for our Thorfers? A Gopher in the pros from week one. Who you got?
I'm going to surprise some people with this one. This wasn't the guy who had the best performance over the weekend, or we even seen him at all. But I have
guess?
to. Yes, please.
Are we going with Eric Wilson?
Not Eric Wilson.
Okay.
No, I'm not. This one, I'm not going like performance on the field. It's more a shout out for an accomplishment. Danny Strigo is this week's Thorfer. Danny Strigo made the Jacksonville Jaguars roster, which I think is incredible. For people out there that don't know, Danny Strigo, the kid worked really hard to get to where he was. There was never a thought that Danny Strigo was going to be a future NFL player, all the way up until over the winter. All of the All-Star games overlooked Danny Strigo, and Danny Strigo got his big shot. I think it was the day before the Senior Bowl because enough guys had opted out. At the Senior Bowl, every year I go to the Senior Bowl to cover it. When you have players that are projected day 2, even early day 3, and certainly day 1, if they dominate the first couple days of practice, their agents will tell them pull out of the game on Saturday. So you see a lot of players opting out during the week of the Senior Bowl because there's no, you already did good in practice. You already showed the NFL evaluators. You don't need to risk injury on Saturday. There was enough guys who left that then the Senior Bowl had to start looking for guys. Danny Strigo, he answered the call and he traveled overnight on a red eye, like basically went right to the airport, flew overnight, and then he gets to Mobile. I don't know that he slept at all. And then the morning, that was the morning of the game. like when he arrives. And so they're like, like measuring him for his freaking jersey and stuff. That afternoon, he's playing in that game. He caught the eye of some evaluators, and even just the act of what he did to get there and to be on the field, bleary-eyed, red-eyed, coming off of no sleep. And now you're playing in this game that is going to be counted for your NFL evaluation. The entire NFL was there watching it, was so impressed by him doing that. And then the rest of his pre-draft process, he's obviously a good interview. He's a guy that people like being around, very hard worker. And the fact that you get this opportunity in the NFL, and no one gave him a shot to make a roster, but the way he competed in camp there with the Jacksonville Jaguars, we have another native Minnesotan son in the NFL because of Danny Strigow, and we have another Gopher alum in the NFL because of Danny Strigow. So there was Gophers certainly that have better performances this week, but I would have been remiss if I did not use today's opportunity to shout out Mr. Danny Strigow. Job well done.
Row the boat, Sky, go Gophers.
Yeah.
Good job by you, Thor. I did not see that one coming. I love this segment. That's clearly maybe going to become, I mean, we don't have many segments, but I think that's a great, we call it a benchmark in the business. Love hearing about our Gophers in the pros, a.k.a. for this podcast, we call them Thorfers. Okay, let's hit some national topics here on the way out the door. I have a friend, his initials are BN. May or may not rhyme with Nilly Bapier. He's wondering who the first big-time coach to be fired this season is. I'm kind of thinking Billy Napier. I don't know if he would be relieved of his duties on Saturday or Sunday, but it kind of feels like Billy Napier needs to find a way to beat LSU this weekend, or he will be looking for a new job at some point in the next calendar year.
Yeah, it's what's the saying? It's getting late early. It's getting late early for Mr. Billy Napier. And we thought, I guess I'll give him credit in this, or in his defense, we all thought he was going to get it last year. It's sort of a similar thing with some losses at the beginning of the season, and then that team had a lot of injuries, and we thought the wheels were going to come off. And credit to Florida, credit to Napier, they did enough facing a hard schedule to get him through. They got into bowl season, and he basically got a 1-year reprieve, and it's next year. We got to take a step forward. This is going to end poorly. The opener, you beat Long Island. No one cares. That's the FCS game that I was talking before about outlawing. Last week, of course, everyone knows this, the walk-off field goal by South Florida to upset Florida. Those were, like when we were talking about the Gopher schedule and like the two freebies for Florida, one of your freebies needed to be South Florida. Ross brought this up, but this Saturday night, in the time window before Minnesota and Cal, that is when Florida will kick off in Baton Rouge against LSU, a top 5 opponent. Not great coming off the loss that you just did. The week after that, now you're going to travel to Miami, another top 5 opponent. Then you host Texas, your third straight top 10 opponent, top 7, I suppose. After that, at Texas A&M, their one, easy game of this stretch, quote unquote, is hosting Mississippi State. But Mississippi State on Saturday beat one of the Big 12's front runners, Arizona State. Mississippi State's not as bad as they were last year. And then Georgia, Kentucky, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Florida State. Florida State, now they're appear to be good again at the end of the season. I do not believe that Florida is going to make a bowl game this year, and that will seal Billy's fate if he even gets to the end of the regular season. That's probably not going to occur. Like the odds of when that guy gets fired, you'd probably put it, set a date in October somewhere. And I might be taking the under, because the next 3 games, if you go 0-3 in those games, my man, pack up your office, and it might be the next 2. If they go 0-2 in those, and then it's 1-3 before the Texas game, they might pull the plug, because you do have a bye in between Miami and Texas. Small favors, I suppose, but yeah, this is not going to end well for Billy Napier.
How about the start to the season for South Florida? You get that nice win over Boise State. You follow it up. Say what you want about Florida, to go on the road to Gainesville and win that game. And, oh, by the way, I know they're heavy underdogs again this upcoming weekend to, I believe it's Miami. You can correct me if I'm wrong. At this point, is there any reason to believe that South Florida won't at least hang with Miami, potentially maybe even win the game? I know you think very highly of their coach and their roster as well. But what a start to the season. And it is fun when you see these G5 schools that have kind of been on the fringe have success. I'll be cheering for it all season long as it lasts.
Yeah, it's a team that can score points. Golish is, Golish was the offensive coordinator for Josh Heupel at Tennessee, and they had all these high-powered offenses, and his offense had been good at South Florida. And so because of that ability to score, you give them a puncher's chance in some of these games, and obviously they've upset 2 top 25 opponents to this point, or at least teams that were in the top 25. The first game, they absolutely annihilated Boise State before the walk-off field goal last week against Florida. What they're so good that they run the hyper tempo, they spread you out as wide as you possibly can go. They have big splits on their offensive line as well, and then they have the dual threat quarterback, and so you have to basically defend every inch of the field at all times while you're dealing with the hyper tempo, and they will tire teams out. They can't get the punter onto the field because then you're just sort of languishing out there. You're stranded as the defender, and they'll just keep running to the line. This one though, this could be the carriage turns into a pumpkin or whatever. This might be it, because the antidote for that team, it's defensive penetration in the front seven. If the opponent, their defensive line, can reset the line of scrimmage, that's how you pull the pin out from the middle of that the circus tent of that USF offense. Miami has one of the more active defensive fronts that we have in college football. Ruben Bain, who as a true freshman was an absolute revelation, 5-star recruit. Last year he was injured for part of the season, so we wanted to see how he'd come back. He'd come back fully healthy this year and has been utterly dominant. They have a couple other NFL dudes on that defensive front. If those guys do what we've seen early on and what they're capable of against South Florida, that's how Byron Brown, the South Florida quarterback who just runs around, you start getting hands on that guy in the backfield. That's how you take the thing down. So a big game for Miami's defensive front in that. And if they can just hold serve, Miami's going to win that game. But if USF can get them back on their heels and you can figure out ways to get the ball out quick around the tackles, you can get Brown out around the tackles really quick. You ain't going to want to do anything up the middle if you're USF. So this is a week where Golish and that offensive staff, they're trying to dream up ways of how do we get the ball quickly outside the tackles and away from those monsters that Miami got in there. We'll see if they can accomplish that. But yeah, this a fascinating game, of course, and one of 3 games we have this weekend in college football between top 18 teams, just because of where USF has risen.
See, you said 3. That's the first word that popped into my head because I had 2. I just realized a typo, and I'm talking out loud, and people are like, what is he talking about? Well, we'll get to it in moments. I will tell you this, Thor. I am reasonably confident if at least for only one more week, Kalen DeBoer at Alabama will very likely not find himself on the same hot seat that Billy Napier may find himself on Saturday. Alabama hosts Wisconsin, and again, it's still early, but Wisconsin just still looks lost on offense, and they don't particularly look very fast or good on defense. I'm not saying Wisconsin can't beat Minnesota or that I'm guaranteeing a Minnesota victory over Wisconsin in 2.5 months. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying it looks like a recipe for disaster when Wisconsin takes on Alabama this weekend, and I sure hope I saw 19.5 that Alabama was favored by. I sure hope I don't have to be sweating out a stupid Wisconsin massive upset at Alabama on Saturday. Please assure me, Thor, there is no world, no dimension, no scenario in which that could possibly happen. Because I will tell you, if Wisconsin beats Alabama, 1, we'll not hear about it for the rest of the year. 2, I'll probably throw up, and I'm on this really long streak of not throwing up, and I would love for that to continue.
There's no planet, there's no situation, and there's no whatever the other one was. Wisconsin's going to get smoked in this game.
My man.
Wisconsin's going to be utterly outclassed. The line is 21.5, which I think people will look at, and maybe you think that's a little bit high. This is not a good matchup for Wisconsin. They are going to be at an enormous speed disadvantage. And you saw it, I felt really bad for UL Monroe on Saturday because UL Monroe had to go to Tuscaloosa after Alabama got made fun of all week coming off that performance against Florida State, and Alabama was obviously locked in and, playing the bad opponent. They did whatever they wanted to him. This is Alabama's first shot against, a P4 opponent since that Florida State game to kind of make a statement, and Wisconsin is ripe for the taking here. I do believe, I don't know if this has been reported, if this is out there, but Wisconsin's starting quarterback who missed the last game, I do believe that he will be back for this game. I don't believe it will help them. Whoever is starting there at quarterback for Wisconsin, I think we're going to essentially see the same result. Wisconsin, they just don't have enough weapons. And then their offensive coordinator, Jeff Grimes, I'm very familiar with Jeff Grimes' work. He was the offensive coordinator at my alma mater last year. I watched every offensive play call that he made. I think Jeff Grimes is one of the worst offensive coordinators that we have in the FBS, and I think he has been for years. It's a guy that just keeps getting jobs because you have these old school head coaches that are like, oh, Grimes knows how to, old offensive line coaches, a guy that knows the run game. He's got the most vanilla play calls, the most vanilla philosophy. There's no thought put into the sequencing of play calls with Jeff Grimes. It's very, very vanilla, and it's on the ground. It is not the kind of offense that goes in, and now we're going to ambush a heavily favored opponent that has a lot more athleticism than us. It's just not. And I'm happy to say this in advance and leave myself susceptible to getting clipped, because I'm not going to be getting clipped on this one. Bama's going to roll Tide.
I feel so much better. Thank you for that. We'll close with this. You mentioned one of the three matchups in the top 18 with USF and Miami. This weekend, we also have Georgia at Tennessee, Texas A&M at Notre Dame. Who do you like in these matchups? And then I'll let you combo platter here. So give me the winners of both matchups. And then also on Notre Dame specifically, I feel like this is a game that they could lose. If Notre Dame does lose, they have to run the table to get to the college football playoff, right? I can't imagine they could then finish, 8-1 to be 9-3. Maybe they would be a fringe team. But the most important game to a team this weekend might be what Notre Dame has in front of them.
For sure. Yeah, and we'll start with the first game, Georgia and Tennessee. That's where College Game Day is this week. It's in Knoxville. Georgia has won in that series. They've won 8 straight games, and that's not the crazy thing. The crazy thing is all 8 of those wins were by 14 or more points. Georgia doesn't just beat Tennessee every year. They beat the ever-loving you-know-what out of Tennessee every year. This line, when in lieu of that, is a bit suspicious. This line of this game, it's only Georgia minus 3.5 this weekend in Knoxville. I'm probably crazy, but I'm going to take those points with Tennessee. I think we get a close game. I think that one is closer to a coin flip. Georgia's talent is a little bit down. We don't know a ton about them because they haven't played anyone yet. Georgia, it was Marshall in the first game, FCS opponent last week, but the quarterback, I don't love Georgia's quarterback. Carson Beck left, and now they're Gunnar Stockton is in. Haven't seen a ton from him to make me confident. I don't love their running back room. Tennessee can spread you out, and they can throw the ball around. Their new quarterback, Joey Aguilar, he's got some gumption. He'll throw the ball down the field. It's a big test for Tennessee, too, but we've seen Tennessee. They flogged Syracuse in the opener. It's the best opponent either of these two teams have played. So I'm going to go against recent history here and take those 3.5 points at Tennessee. And then the other one, Texas A&M traveling to Notre Dame, and this goes into your point, Ross, about the importance of this game for the home team in particular. Texas A&M, you could lose this game, and it's not really going to change much for you. Obviously, you prefer, because Texas A&M, you have the bullets of a couple losses you can take, and you're still going to make the playoff. Notre Dame, which started 0-1, I believe this is a must-win game. Because I believe if Notre Dame loses this game, and even if they win the next 10 games in a row, I do not believe Notre Dame will be in the college football playoff. The reason for that is the first game that Notre Dame played, where they lost by the field goal against Miami. Miami is ranked, of course, and they will be ranked going forward. Texas A&M comes into this game 16th. The rest of the schedule for Notre Dame, your remaining 10 games, you do not play a ranked opponent, and you got a lot of cans on that thing. The rest of Notre Dame's schedule is not very good. If you lose this game to Texas A&M, and at the end of the season you're 10-2, but your resume does not have a win over a ranked team, I do not believe the committee will let you in. So Notre Dame has to win this one. Line of this game, Notre Dame -6.5. To me, that is too many points. Notre Dame, they're not a team that plays in a way where you're typically going to be able to create margin against a good opponent like Texas A&M is. Texas A&M is really, really good in the trenches. They have a deep running back room. They have some NFL receivers there too, and their defenses are always good. Notre Dame has issues throwing the ball down the field. They did last year with Riley Leonard. They do once again with C.J. Carr. The offense, extremely uninspiring that first game against Miami. The passing game for Notre Dame is just a bunch of screens. Screen, swing. Okay, let's do it to Love now. All right, now let's do the bubble screen outside. All right, let's do another screen. It's just runs and then screens. That's what they're off, and scramble. That's what their offense is. A defense is good and as talented as Texas A&M, and then your defensive play caller for Texas A&M, one of the best we have in the nation, and Mike Elko. In offense that is as limited as Notre Dame's is, you can still grind it, of course. I mean, they made the national title with a very similar offense last year. Slightly better quarterback in Riley Leonard experience, but it's the same sort of a thing, and you have the same sort of bell cow driver of it with Jeremiah Love, your running back there. I think this one ends as a low-scoring, very close game. I will pick Notre Dame to win it, but I'm going to say more like 3 points. I'll say Notre Dame by a field goal, and I'll say that Texas A&M comfortably covers.
Great stuff as always, Thor. You even got a little bit of a cheer there. I'll give you another one.
Yeah. Roll the boat. Ski on. Go Gophers.
We will reconvene middle of the week next week. We'll primarily spend our time on Gophers and Cal, but as we are wont to do now, having done a handful of these, we'll mix in our weekly Thorfer. We'll take a look around college football, and I continue to be appreciative of your time here weekly on Gophers 101. Thor, we haven't done this enough. Most people who follow anything SKOR North puts out, they know, but I have seen in the comments some new people to SKOR North thanks to this show. So where can people find you, my man?
Also on Purple Daily on Thursdays, we do the Thursday episode where if you like JJ McCarthy talk, come and check us out, especially tomorrow where we are going to have Greg Holcomb, JJ McCarthy's private quarterback tutor since the 7th grade. Is going to be joining me, Phil, Judd, and Declan for an in-depth breakdown of the first game for J.J. McCarthy's NFL debut, where the NFL just named him NFC Offensive Player of the Week for his performance against the Bears in his debut. We'll be talking about that one in depth, and then also we'll take a look into J.J. McCarthy's development since the 7th grade, from the guy that oversaw the whole thing and every sort of bump and bruise along the way. Holcomb's got a pretty fascinating perspective, so we're going to get into that tomorrow.
Appreciate you, my man. We'll talk again next week. And oh, by the way, you can find me on the X Machine at the Ross Brendel. Thanks, Thor.
My man.
That'll do it for this edition of Gophers 1.